need the money tomorrow. My father ordered me, handing me my sister's debt of $800,000. And no delays. He added. I smiled and said, okay. 4 hours later, I was at the airport. When he came to my house for the money, he found only a closed door and a box, which he opened and started screaming. The rain in Austin didn't wash things clean. It only made the humidity feel like a heavy, wet blanket. I stood in my penthouse apartment, staring at the skyline, a glass of vintage Bordeaux in my hand. To anyone looking in, I was Olivia Hayes, the finance queen, the woman who turned failing startups into gold mines. But to the man currently pounding on my door, I was nothing more than an ATM with a pulse. 3 sharp knocks. Not a request but a verdict. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know it was him. Richard Hayes. My father. A man whose ego was so large it had its own gravitational pull. When I opened the door, the scent of his expensive, suffocating cologne hit me first. It was the smell of my childhood, oppressive and demanding. I don't have time for small talk, Olivia, he barked, stepping into my living room as if he'd paid the mortgage. He hadn't. I had. Every cent. He threw a thick, leather-bound folder onto my marble kitchen island. The sound it made was heavy, the sound of a debt that wasn't mine. $800,000, he said, his voice cold. By noon tomorrow. Wired to Madison's creditors. No excuses, no delays. I didn't pick up the folder. I didn't even blink. 800,000, Dad. That's not a debt. That's a small country's GDP. What did Madison do this time? Buy a fleet of yachts she can't sail. Behind him, my sister Madison drifted into the room. She was 32 going on 6. Her eyes were expertly rimmed with red, her lower lip trembling just enough to trigger my father's protector instinct. She looked like a broken porcelain doll, expensive to fix and even more expensive to own. It wasn't like that, Liv, Madison whimpered, clutching her Chanel bag like a rosary. Tyler's investment just... It went sideways. We have kids. We have a reputation. You have a gambling problem disguised as investing, I countered, finally looking at her. And you have a shopping addiction disguised as lifestyle maintenance. I paid for your wedding. Paid for your house. I even paid for the car you drove here in. When does it end? My father's hand slammed against the counter, the marble vibrating under the force of his anger. It ends when the family is safe. You've done well, Olivia. You've made more money than God. But you've forgotten who gave you the brain to make it. You're the strong one. Madison is fragile. It's your duty to carry the weight she can't. Duty. The word felt like a poison-tipped needle. I'm the strong one, I whispered, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. And because I'm strong, I'm the one you drain. Because I don't cry, I don't need comfort. Is that how it works, Richard? Don't call me by my name, he hissed. Family first, Olivia. Always. If you don't wire that money, those creditors will come for Madison's house. They'll come for my reputation. Is that what you want? To see your father ruined because of your greed? I looked at them, the father who turned guilt into currency and the sister who spent it like water. 4 years I had been the safety net. But a net that's pulled too tight for too long eventually snaps. Fine, I said quietly. The word hung in the air, sudden and sharp. Madison's face lit up instantly, the tears vanishing as if by magic. Oh, Liv, thank you. I knew you'd understand. She reached out to hug me, but I stepped back, avoiding her touch. My father nodded, his posture relaxing into that smug, self-satisfied arrogance I hated. Good. Noon tomorrow. Don't disappoint me again. As they walked out, my father patted the doorframe of my apartment, a silent reminder that in his mind, everything I owned was actually his. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of a decade of resentment. I walked over to the folder and opened it. Wasn't just $800,000 in debts. It was a roadmap of their betrayal. Tyler's gambling receipts, Madison's luxury hotel bills. And at the bottom of a loan guarantee I saw it, my father's signature. But not just his. He had forged my name as a co-guarantor. A cold, calm shiver raced down my spine. This wasn't just a request for help. It was a trap. He had already sold my soul to protect his favorite child. I closed the folder and picked up my phone. I didn't call the bank. I called my lawyer, Laura. "It's time," I said, my voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. "Trigger the blackout protocol. Everything we've been preparing for the last 6 months. I want it done by sunrise." "Are you sure, Olivia?" Laura's voice was concerned. "There's no coming back from this. You'll be cutting the cord completely." I looked at the family photo on the mantel, the one where I was cropped half out of the frame, standing in the shadows while Madison and my father basked in the spotlight. "I'm not cutting the cord, Laura," I replied, staring at my own reflection in the dark window. "I'm burning the whole bridge. I'm done being the solution. It's time I became the consequence." While the city of Austin slept, I became a ghost in my own life. The blackout protocol wasn't just a plan. It was a surgical extraction. For 6 months, I had watched the shadows grow, noticing the way my father's requests for money had turned into demands, then into threats. I had seen the forgeries, the hidden accounts, and the way they looked at my success, not with pride but with hunger. I sat at my desk, the glow of 3 monitors illuminating my face. My fingers flew across the keyboard. 3 a.m. I logged into the Hayes Family Trust. My father had added himself as a secondary signatory last year, claiming it was for estate planning. In reality, he'd been using it as a slush fund. With 3 clicks, I executed a legal maneuver Laura and I had prepared. I dissolved my portion of the trust based on the bad faith clause we discovered in the fine print. The funds, millions of dollars, began their silent migration to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, tucked under an LLC they didn't know existed. 3:45 a.m. Next came the real estate. My father lived in a sprawling estate in Oakline. Madison lived in a designer villa in the hills. Both titles were held by Oakline Holdings. What they didn't know, or chose to ignore, was that I was the 100% shareholder of Oakline. I had bought those houses to keep them afloat years ago. Now I signed the digital paperwork to put both properties on the private market. Not to sell them immediately, but to freeze them in a legal limbo that would strip my father of his borrowing power. 4:30 a.m. I drafted the emails. One to my firm's board of directors, announcing an indefinite sabbatical. Another to my building manager, informing them that my penthouse was being vacated immediately. Then I turned to the physical world. I didn't want my clothes, my jewelry, or the furniture that reminded me of the strong daughter persona I'd been forced to play. Packed 1 suitcase. Inside were the essentials. My passport, my laptop, a few changes of comfortable clothes, and a single battered photograph of my mother. She was the only one who had ever seen me, the real me, before she passed away and left me alone with a father who only saw numbers. I walked through my apartment, carrying a small, plain cardboard box. This was the receipt I had promised. Inside I placed the ledger, a 50-page printout of every dollar I had given them over the last 10 years. Total, $4.2 million. The forgery, a copy of the loan document where my father had forged my signature, highlighted in neon yellow. The keys, not to my apartment, but the keys to the storage unit where I'd moved all the family heirlooms I had rescued from their various bankruptcies. A USB drive, containing a recorded message. I sealed the box with heavy-duty tape. The sound of the tape tearing felt like a bone breaking, the final snap of a relationship that had been dead for a long time. 5:45 a.m. The sun was beginning to bleed over the horizon, a pale, sickly orange. I hauled my suitcase to the elevator. My heart was thumping against my ribs, but for the first time in my life, it wasn't from anxiety. It was from the sheer, terrifying rush of freedom. I drove my SUV, the one I'd paid cash for, to a private airfield 30 miles outside the city. I didn't want to go through a commercial terminal where my father's connections could track me. I had a charter waiting, a small Cessna that would take me to a place where the name Hayes meant absolutely nothing. As I pulled onto the tarmac, my phone began to vibrate in the cup holder. Incoming call, Dad. Then, text message from Madison. Hey sis, just making sure we're still on for noon? Tyler is really stressed, he needs that confirmation code ASAP. Love you. I looked at the screen until it went dark. I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, hollow pity. They were so blinded by their own greed that they couldn't even hear the silence before the storm. I stepped out of the car, handed the keys to a prearranged transport agent who would sell the vehicle and wire the proceeds, and walked toward the plane. Heading far, Ms. Hayes? The pilot asked, reaching for my bag. Far enough to disappear, I said. As the plane taxied down the runway, I looked down at the sprawling lights of Austin. Somewhere down there in a few hours my father would wake up, put on his power tie, and prepare to collect his prize. He would find a locked door, an empty apartment, and a cardboard box that would dismantle his world. The plane lifted off. My stomach dropped, then leveled out. I leaned my head against the cold window and closed my eyes. The finance queen was dead. Long live Olivia. 12 p.m. Austin, Texas. Richard Hayes pulled his Mercedes into the circular driveway of Olivia's luxury high-rise. He checked his Rolex. Precisely noon. He liked punctuality. It was a sign of a well-trained subordinate. And despite her wealth, he still viewed Olivia as his most efficient subordinate. Stay in the car, Madison, Richard said, glancing at his younger daughter, who was busy reapplying lip gloss in the passenger seat. Oh, come on, Dad. I want to see her face when she gives us the wire confirmation. I want to tell her we're even now, Madison chirped. Richard grunted. We're never even with family, Madison. We just balance the books. They walked into the lobby, Richard nodding imperiously to the doorman, who looked unusually uncomfortable. They rode the elevator to the 42nd floor in smug silence. When they reached penthouse A, Richard didn't knock. He reached for the handle, expecting it to be unlocked for his arrival. It was bolted shut. Olivia. It's noon. Open up. No answer. Olivia, don't play games. We have a deadline. Madison frowned, her phone buzzed. Dad. I just tried calling her again. It says the number is no longer in service. Richard's face flushed a deep, angry purple. What? That's impossible. She's probably just being dramatic. He pounded harder. Olivia. If you're trying to teach us a lesson, it's not working. Open this door or I'll have the manager do it. Just as he turned to storm back to the elevator, he saw it. A plain brown cardboard box sat on the welcome mat, tucked slightly into the corner. His name was written on it in thick, black permanent marker. Richard. He stared at it for a long beat. A sense of unease, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the back of his neck. He knelt down, a rare act of humility for him, and ripped the tape off. Madison leaned over his shoulder. Is that the money? Did she leave a check? Richard didn't answer. He pulled out the stack of papers first. His eyes scanned the ledger. $100,000 for Madison's debt in 2018. $250,000 for the startup failure in 2020. $50,000 for a vacation. That was actually a rehab stint. Page after page of red ink. Then he hit the highlighted page. The forgery. His breath hitched. She knew, he whispered. Knew what? Madison snatched a paper from the box. Wait. Oakline Holdings. Dad, why is there a notice of eviction for my house in here? This says the owner is Olivia Hayes. I thought the family trust owned my house. Richard's hands began to shake. He reached the bottom of the box and found the USB drive and a small, portable speaker Olivia had left behind. He plugged it in. Olivia's voice filled the hallway. It wasn't the voice of the tired, compliant daughter they knew. It was the voice of a woman who had already left the building. Hi, Dad. Hi, Madison. The recording began. If you're hearing this, it means you've finally realized that the well has run dry. For years you told me that family first was our motto. But what you really meant was Olivia last. You didn't love me. You loved what I could do for you. You loved the safety I provided while you lived lives you couldn't afford. How dare she? Madison hissed, but Richard held up a hand, his face turning pale. Inside that box is the cost of my duty. Over $4 million. Consider that my final payment. I've dissolved the trust. I've reclaimed the titles to the houses you live in. You won't be homeless, not yet, but you are officially on your own. Dad, the forgery you committed is a felony. I won't report it to the police. Provided you never, ever try to find me. If I see your face or hear your voice or get a single family first text from Madison, those documents go straight to the district attorney. The recording paused for a second, and Olivia's voice softened just a fraction. You always said I was the strong one. You were right. I was strong enough to carry you for 10 years. And now I'm strong enough to let you fall. Goodbye. The speaker cut to static. Richard slumped against the wall of the hallway, the papers fluttering from his hands like falling leaves. The great Richard Hayes, the man who owned every room he entered, suddenly looked very small and very old. Dad! Madison's voice was high-pitched, bordering on a scream. Dad, what does she mean, on our own? Who's going to pay the creditors at noon? It's 12:15. They're going to freeze my accounts. Richard looked at his younger daughter, the one he had protected, spoiled, and used as an excuse to drain his other child. He saw the panic in her eyes, the utter lack of substance. He realized with a crushing weight that by saving Madison, he had destroyed her. And by using Olivia, he had lost the only part of his wife that was still alive. She's gone, Madison, Richard whispered, his voice cracking. She's really gone. But the money, Madison shrieked, clutching the empty box. There has to be money. There was no money. There was only the sound of the wind whistling through the high-rise hallway and the realization that the Bank of Olivia was closed forever. The Atlantic Ocean doesn't care about your bank balance or your family drama. It just breathes, in and out, with a cold, salty indifference that I found incredibly healing. I sat on the porch of a small, weathered cottage that smelled of cedar and old books. In my hand wasn't a spreadsheet or a legal brief, but a mug of steaming black coffee. My hair was messy, my sweater was oversized, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like a soldier in a war I never enlisted in. Maine was quiet. It was a world of gray stones, deep blue water, and people who didn't ask what you did for a living, but rather if you'd seen the morning fog lift off the harbor. My phone, a new device with a number known only to Laura and a few trusted colleagues, vibrated on the wooden table. It was a message from Laura. Update. Richard has officially stepped down from the board of Hayes Supply. The internal audit you triggered forced his hand. He's selling the Mercedes. Madison. Well, Madison is working. She's a floor manager at a furniture boutique. She's still complaining, but she's paying her own electric bill. The houses are being liquidated to cover the debts. They're surviving Olivia. Just like you said they would. I set the phone down and looked out at the horizon. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I just felt light. The phantom weight on my shoulders, the one I'd carried since my mother's funeral, had finally evaporated. A week later a package arrived. It had been forwarded through 3 different addresses to keep my location a secret. It was a single postcard. On the front was a picture of a quiet fishing dock. On the back, the handwriting was shaky, stripped of its usual calligraphic arrogance. Olivia, I spent my life teaching you how to build an empire, but I never taught you how to feel safe in one. I see that now. You didn't just walk away, you woke me up. I'm learning that a father's job isn't to be a master, but a harbor. I don't expect you to come home. I don't even know if home exists anymore. But I am proud of the woman you were brave enough to become, even if she's a woman I no longer know. Take care of yourself. For real this time. Dad, I stared at the postcard for a long time. I looked for the hook, the hidden demand, the manipulative twist. But for the first time it wasn't there. It was just words on paper. I didn't cry until that evening, as I walked down to the shoreline. I cried for the girl who had been too strong for too long. I cried for the mother who wasn't there to see me break free. And I cried for the man who had to lose everything before he could see his daughter as a human being instead of a resource. The sun began to set, painting the Maine sky in shades of bruised purple and burning gold. I took a deep breath of the freezing air. My life used to be defined by what I could do for others. My value was measured in the fires I put out and the debts I covered. But as I watched the tide come in, I realized that freedom isn't just about running away. It's about standing still and realizing you don't need to be anyone's hero to be worthy of the air you breathe. I walked back toward my little cottage, the porch light glowing like a small, steady star. I wasn't the finance queen anymore. I wasn't the strong daughter. I was just Olivia. And for now that was more than enough. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in 30 years, the silence didn't feel like a threat. Felt like peace.